Welcome to Inside Arvada, the City of Arvada's podcast, where we bring you conversations with the people who make Arvada a thriving community. Hear stories about the past, present, and future of Arvada through the lens of the city team members who help make it all happen. Explore the complex topics impacting our community. From the roads you drive, to the water you drink, the parks where you play, to what your neighbors think. Join us as we take you inside Arvada.
Hello and welcome to Inside Arvada, the official podcast of the City of Arvada. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's show. Very excited for our guest. It's Kellee Van Bruggen, the city's bicycle pedestrian coordinator. Kellee has been in the transportation planning field for 17 years, and she's developed a passion for helping individuals feel safe and connected through multiple travel modes. As a transportation planner, she's worked with various government levels and has helped leverage millions of dollars in funding to provide safe and accessible facilities for the communities she has served. When she's not planning, she enjoys spending time with her family outdoors, camping, hiking, biking, and skiing. And as always, today I'm joined by my co-host, Katie Patterson. Hi, Katie.
Hey, Sean. Yeah, it was great to have a conversation with Kellee today. Just really cool work that she gets to do planning for our transportation network and kind of what the future of transportation can look like for Arvada and really visioning for what the community would like to see in the future. She talks a lot about how that's hard work to do. A lot of planning goes into it. And then, of course, it can take a really long time to actually see that change come to fruition. So excited to talk with her today. Hi, Kellee. Thanks so much for being with us today. So can you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do for the city?
Sure. So I am the bike and pedestrian coordinator with the city. I have a degree in community and regional planning from Iowa State University. And my first job out of college, I worked for an MPO, our Metropolitan Planning Organization in Sioux City, Iowa, which was really fun and interesting because it's a tri-state MPO. So we worked with 3 different federal jurisdictions and states and several counties and communities. And then from there, I worked for the city and county of Lincoln, Lancaster County in Nebraska, doing very similar type work, but kind of expanded a little bit more with transit and long-range transportation planning. And now I'm here.
Very cool. And so your position is part of the small but mighty mobility planning and innovation team with the city. So what does your team do, and how does your role as bike and pedestrian coordinator fit in that team and the work that they do?
Yeah, thanks. So we are in the Public Works Department and share space with a lot of really technical and wonderful experts in their field. And so we bring kind of a different perspective to transportation. So we're kind of on the forefront of exploring what transportation could look like in the future for the community. And we have like you mentioned, a small but mighty team, bike ped coordinator, travel demand management, and parking coordinator, and then someone that kind of does it all and oversees our division.
And what sort of role does educating the community and engaging with the community, what sort of role do those responsibilities fit into your scope of work?
They're super integral in what we do. So again, kind of envisioning what we want the community to look like, especially from a transportation perspective, really involves a lot of feedback and engagement with the community, understanding their needs, wants, desires, how they want to get around the community for transportation trips, if they're going to the grocery store, or recreationally, how they want to be able to navigate through the community. So we do a lot of engagement and public outreach.
And so we're talking about transportation planning, and you mentioned transportation demand management a little bit. I think it'd be good to kind of explain what that is for folks. And then one example of transportation planning that I'm most familiar with is our bike master plan. And so what are maybe some examples of transportation planning or some projects maybe, and what should people know about what transportation planning is?
Absolutely. So it really looks at the network holistically. So most of us probably drive. However, there's people that have different options or needs for getting around the community or the metropolitan area. So we want to make sure that when we're addressing some of the transportation needs and concerns, that we're really looking at it from an approach of how everybody wants to get around. So a lot of transportation planning is just kind of determining where those different facility types make sense. And with our bike master plan, we put in a lot of work back in 2017 and had this approved, where we took a look at the current existing conditions in the community, where we currently have bike paths, on-street network, so bike lanes and things like that, or signage that you might see around the community, and took a look at what roads they were on and how comfortable that felt to people. And then assess that even further. Does that specific facility make sense for that type of roadway, or should it be a little bit more protected for individuals because there's higher speed of traffic or there's a lot more traffic on that roadway? And so it gave us kind of a blueprint for how we would move forward with different projects in that regard.
That's interesting to know, is that those on-street bike lanes are chosen very strategically and not just like, oh, this would make sense to connect this off-street trail to that off-street trail, but there's a lot more strategic thinking that goes into where those on-street lanes are. That makes a lot of sense. And so we also have, a lot of off-street trails as well, like the Ralston Creek Trail, the Van Bibber Creek Trail, Little Dry Creek Trail, and those get used a lot. They're one of the things people enjoy about most living here in Arvada, and we want to make sure that they're safe for everyone. And so what are some just, basic and very important trail etiquette tips that we want to encourage people to follow?
Absolutely. So, one thing is if you're walking your dog, like I love to do with mine, make sure that they're leashed and try to also hold kind of a tighter leash, so about 6 feet, so that your dog isn't going off the other side of the path where you might encounter bicyclists that are passing you. Also, make sure you're cleaning up behind your dog. It's always very important, especially for water quality in our community. Also, if you're a bicyclist, let others know that you're passing. You're probably moving at a much faster rate than them, so you want to make sure that you're audible ahead of time. You can use a bike bell. You can easily just say on your left, just giving kind of that indication that you're coming up behind somebody. And then another thing to note is that we do have a speed limit on our trail network, so we have that set at 15 miles an hour. Bikes and pedestrians move at much different rates of speed, and so the higher speed that you're going on your bike creates a little bit more of a friction with pedestrians. So we want to make sure that we're all being aware of each other on the trails and that we're using appropriate judgment while we're out there.
Yeah, those are some great tips. It's public spaces for everyone to enjoy, and we want to make sure everyone's comfortable and feeling safe when they're out there. I know there's often some questions we get about e-bikes and sort of e-scooters. What sort of e-bikes and scooters are allowed on our trails? And so can you help kind of us understand, I feel like there's class 1, 2, and 3 e-bikes. Which one of those e-bikes are able to be used on our trails?
Yes, so we updated the municipal code a little bit ago to be consistent with the Colorado rules that outline different e-bikes and e-scooters. So we do allow for class 1 and class 2 e-bikes on the trail. Class 3 e-bikes have a higher speed threshold and don't require as much assistance with pedaling. So we want to make sure that when we're out on the trail, we're sticking to those class 1 and 2. And even though they can go higher than that 15 miles an hour, we're still maintaining that speed limit. We also do allow for e-scooters to be on the trail, again, following the speed limits that we have out there.
Do most people know the class of device they've purchased? I'm thinking, rental scooters, I think, have a threshold or they capped at like 15 miles an hour anyways, I think. Is that right? But I was just wondering, will people even know if they have a class 3?
Likely, I'm hoping that the bike shops are explaining that to them when they're out there. And with those types of e-bikes, they do feel a little bit more comfortable going at those higher speeds with traffic. So utilizing those bike lanes if you want to be out there. With the class 1 and 2, usually those require a little bit more of that pedal assist or like turning something on or using a throttle to help you get going. So there are some like differentiations and kind of the mechanics of how the bike works too.
And then I know we have a big equestrian community, especially in the western part of town. What about equestrians on trails? Are they allowed?
Yes, they are allowed. Those trails should be marked. And if you are passing an equestrian rider, just make sure that you're being thoughtful and polite as you're doing that. Give them room to maneuver and no sudden movements.
Yeah, I think we should have those are pretty well marked. We have trail maps on our website that we'll link to in the show notes, and it does distinguish which of those trails are equestrian use and which ones aren't. And so big history part of Arvada is those equestrian trails, and so we want to make sure that's continue going forward as well. What about golf carts? I know, are those allowed on our trails?
They are not. We do have the golf course that kind of intersects some of Ralston Creek Trail out west. So if you are using a golf cart on the golf course, we just want to make sure that you're kind of looking both ways and being mindful of the cross traffic on the trail and allowing them to continue on their path before you cross.
Great.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about trails. We talked a little bit about the bike master plan. There's also a parks master plan. And all of these things identify things like trail gaps or gaps in our bike infrastructure. So trail connectivity is something that's super important to our community. We know that. We all like to be able to get where we're going easily. But we also have over 150 miles of trails, and that is really impressive compared to some of our neighboring communities. And so we want to continue improving that trail network, but we know that also takes resources. And so what are some of the trail gaps or enhancements and improvements that the city's working on? And what might be some of the challenges that we're facing with making improvements?
Yeah, so we have a lot of gaps in trail connectivity that we've heard from the public that they would really like to see happen. I guess fortunately or unfortunately, sometimes we're really bound by the types of funding opportunities that we can get. We do have funding set aside within our capital improvement program. However, a lot of times we use that as kind of seed money for those larger grants that we can get. That helps us kind of provide the local match that's required of those federal grants to get us going. I think another thing is just the cost of materials has been increasing significantly over the last while now, and funding is just not keeping up. And so when we're looking at different projects, we're really trying to be strategic in where we're spending those dollars, and also noting that we might only be able to do a portion of what we really want to do, but trying to provide the facilities that people want and need out there.
Yeah, I think a couple examples of what you're talking to that are top of mind for me right now that we're, talking with the neighborhoods about are on Tennyson Street. So that's coming to, and we can talk about this more too, but this is where it moves from kind of, right, the work that you and your team have done to plan the bike pedestrian improvements on Tennyson. That is a grant-funded partnership with Adams County. So, for example, they are really helping with the funding for that one. And that, makes it take a little bit longer. There's additional kind of processes you have to go through to get that approved through not just the city, but the county. And then in that same vein, right, your team really helped with some of the planning of that. And then it moves over to design and construction with a roadway engineer. And so it's one of those kind of shared projects now that it's coming to fruition. I don't know that there's a question in there. I just was using it as an example.
It makes total sense. I think one of the great things about being in public works is that there is such like a great collaborative effort that's happening with not just like the planning, but we're working with roadway, with traffic, all these people that kind of touch things. So while we're kind of at the forefront and thinking about grant funding and planning things, we're not leaving behind the engineers. They're involved in that process, and so they know kind of what, or can anticipate what we're kind of planning for the next little while, so that we can all be on the same page and advance things.
Yeah, that's great.
Another example of us working with other municipalities to match funding and grant opportunities is the Colorado Front Range Trail, and that's trail project that we began recently because we are getting match funds from, I think, Jeffco Open Space, and there might be even a few other sources of funding. And so we are, working on, I think it's like a 1.5 mile trail gap as part of a larger Colorado Front Range Trail that's eventually one day going to go, I think, all the way from, southern border of Colorado and Mexico all the way up to Wyoming, and tons of work to be done throughout the whole state. But, we are working on that project because we have the money from other partners as part of that project too. And so it's, it all comes down to funding a lot of times, obviously. So I'm glad you pointed that out. Another kind of partner project that we're working on specific to trails is the Little Dry Creek Trail feasibility study that I think was recently completed. And that's looking at, connecting that Little Dry Creek Trail there, about what Vance to over Wadsworth. Tell us a little bit about that project and kind of where we're at with that.
Yeah, so we received grant funding from the state for planning, just do a feasibility study for that gap of the Little Dry Creek where, it drops off at Vance and then picks back up on the north side of 80th by Pomona. And with that project, we took a look at what the different alternatives could be on how to safely cross people at Wadsworth, specifically just because that's a high volume of traffic, high speed, very, very like uncomfortable feeling. So with that project, we went ahead and developed 5 alternatives that looked at that potential grade separation, whether that was over or under. And then our consultant team really dove in to see if there were any fatal flaws with any of those. So we weren't going to be able to procure right of way, for instance, or it wouldn't be accessible for Americans with Disabilities Act. And things like that. And if there was anything that we could just kind of eliminate from that point. We came up with one preferred alternative at this time that we plan on advancing through design to determine kind of like some of those safety elements, since we are looking at an underpass of Wadsworth at Little Dry Creek. How can we activate the space so that it feels comfortable for people to utilize? It draws people to the area, so you have more eyes on it, just kind of a feeling of that comfort and safety with an underpass. So those are just things that we're looking to for the future with that project.
Yeah, just so many variables and things to think about when you're looking at a project that big in scope of the utilities and the right-of-way and accessibility. And so it's not as easy of just like, yeah, we should build an overpass over Wads. That makes the most sense and connect this gap. But there's a whole lot more that goes into it. But at least, it seems like this is kind of one of the initial first steps of making that project a reality, hopefully one day. Because I know once you get west of that section, that Little Dry Creek Trail is great. And it goes all the way, I think, to Indiana. And then if you are able to start heading east, that Little Dry Creek Trail goes all the way to, Westminster Station there, and the Clear Creek Valley Trail, I think it connects to eventually. So to make that connection there would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing you're touching on too is like the length of time it takes to do this sort of thing. Like this was a very kind of so like step 1, identify the need. Step 1.A, I don't know, is like start doing a feasibility study. And then it's like, that's not even identifying funding for these next rounds, like you're talking about, to do design, and just that takes several years, and then it'd be, several more years. So still a lot more resources to be identified to get to those next steps. But this is a really good like foundational document and foundational plan to start doing some of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. We don't have on the calendar any type of construction at this point just because it's so up in the air, but it does give us some bandwidth and kind of a blueprint essentially to what types of funding we want to really move forward with, and what partners are we going to be working with to make sure that we can implement the project.
Yeah. So one thing we haven't talked about too much is one of the words in the name of your team is innovation, mobility planning and innovation. And you have some really cool innovative tools that are out there being used right now that are pretty new for us as a city. One being the trail counters, and then the other being the data bike. So tell us a little bit about what those are and how we use those tools.
Sure. So in our bike master plan, one of the recommendations, the bike master plan really does cover more than just infrastructure. It talks kind of holistically about bike and pedestrian planning as a whole. So one of the recommendations was to install bike ped counters to start getting kind of a feel of what's happening out on the trails. Where are people going? What's kind of the impetus for it? Are we seeing more weekend traffic versus weekday traffic? Are we seeing it spike after school and work, or is it kind of throughout the day? Does weather make a difference in how people are utilizing our trail network? So all of this data that we're getting really helps give us an idea of what types of infrastructure we could do to better improve your experience on the trail, what kind of policy changes could be made, what programmatic activities should we be making, looking at maintenance and things like that. So that's been really a useful tool for us. They were installed last year, so we're still trying to get kind of our feet under us in understanding big picture what this all means for the community. And then with the data bike, I can't claim full credit for this because, as with all good ideas, it was probably taken from somewhere else first. With my past experience in working with some other communities, I was familiar with Des Moines. They had a data bike in place, and they were kind of looking at what their 2.0 system would look like and had put together a white paper. And so I reached out and just asked, like, hey, would you mind if I kind of took this from you? And so we've been coordinating between the two since they've had theirs for a while. I want to say like the mid 2010s. They've been having their program run. So we really could learn from what they had going and like maybe some issues they've had, successes and things like that, and kind of bring it here. So we have an electric tricycle that is equipped with an iPhone and a GoPro camera. So the iPhone has an app that measures the pavement surface. So really looking at the roughness of what you're traversing on. And the GoPro is there so that it can provide that little bit of information to us on the back end. Did somebody riding the trike run over a big stick? And that's why we saw a spike in things. Or was it at a bridge where maybe the pavement just doesn't meet the surface? And so then it gives us kind of a geolocation of where we're experiencing some of those issues. Or if there is kind of a panel that is in disrepair, maybe we put that on the maintenance schedule to take care of. Another part of it is we are working on a 360 camera that we could attach to it so we can upload that information to Google Street View. So if you're not quite sure how you might want to get somewhere and you know there's a trail there, but you just don't know how it connects, you can utilize Google Street View on anticipating your ride. So it just gives a little bit more opportunity for people who might not feel comfortable just kind of like diving in, but that they can plan ahead.
Yeah, that's really cool. So is someone just spending all day riding a bike around Arvada's trails. Yes,
Right.
a really cool tricycle.
A really cool tricycle. We had a summer intern this year
cool.
who went out and collected data on all of the trails. I think we have some kind of cleanup to do with it, but
the intern went on every trail.
yes.
Wow. Like every mile of trail has been theoretically. We'll see if it's all accurate.
Yeah. Well, the app I think did stop a couple times, so I think we have some gaps in where we need to go back out and test it out. But we've also talked about how this might be able to translate into like on-street infrastructure. So me as a bicyclist, I'm probably feeling the road very differently than somebody in their car, and so maybe not riding every street, but can we overlay that with what our pavement management team is picking up when they do their data collection? And maybe kind of like calibrating some different areas from what we're picking up with the app, and then overlaying that with pavement management to see are there bike lanes that we really should be focusing on?
Are you kind of back to the trail counter, but it all connects the trail counters are on trails. Is there potential, thinking about on-road bike lanes, is there potential to use that information to learn more about which bike lanes or bike routes in the city that are on street are more used, or is that kind of separate?
Absolutely. So there's a bunch of different technology out there. And I know our partners, Dr. Cog, which is the Regional Council of Government, they have some trail counters too that are mobile that we could potentially leverage on figuring that out. And I think some of the other tools that we've just used in the past end up being Strava, but that's a self-selected group of people who are mapping their rides and things like that. We do get data from our e-scooters on where people are riding, and they typically are using the on-street bike infrastructure. It just feels safer to be in those spaces.
Right.
Very cool to learn about the data bike and what it actually does. I've seen it kind of stored there outside the fitness center at City Hall, and I've always been curious what it actually is capable of doing. So it'd be great to even add to the Google Street View. And I know Google Maps, I feel like, is always improving, and you can do like the preview your route now. And so I think that's exactly what you're talking about. So if we can add to that and give people a little bit more idea of their route ahead of time if they've never done it, that'd be great.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so before we go to the lightning round, this is our opportunity, or your opportunity, Kellee, to maybe clear up some misconceptions or touch on any topics we haven't asked you about yet. So is there anything that you wanted to mention to folks out there to clarify things that maybe you do about your work that people think you don't do, or vice versa, think that you should be doing that is actually not part of your role?
Yeah, and I think we touched upon some of it throughout the interview. Is just that projects really do take a long time, especially if we're getting federal funding. We have to make sure we're following all of the rules and regulations that are set with those. We have contracts in place to ensure that we're doing that. So I know as kind of an end user that can be incredibly frustrating that we got a grant and where is it? It has to go through a pretty lengthy process. I think the other thing that I would mention is we do have a heads up campaign that we run, and you'll probably see that coming out soon because we try to do that during time change. Is just be aware of your surroundings, no matter what mode of travel you are. Everybody wants to get home safe. At the end of the day, everyone wants to get there efficiently and as quick as possible, but just make sure that we're all just being good stewards of our community and watching out for everybody.
Yeah, that's a great reminder. We can link to the Heads Up webpage too for folks for some more information. And also to your first point, you just have to to mention. I think it's always a good opportunity to think a little bit bigger, right? Like we want that change now because we want to benefit from it. But when you're planning that, you're planning it for future generations too. And so like doing it right is super important, not just doing it fast.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's something like we can all understand that this is infrastructure is hard to change. And so doing it right is really important so that future generations benefit too. And then another one we didn't mention is the Go-tober campaign, because that'll be coming up soon in October. What's that campaign?
So Dr. Cog has a website, Way to Go, and they promote a lot of different challenges through the year. They do Bike to Work Day and kind of provide assistance throughout that. But then with Go-tober, they ask people to maybe shift their mindset on how they could possibly get to work. If you want to drive, go right ahead. That's totally fine. We don't want to make anybody do something they don't feel comfortable with. And but if you're kind of thinking about different opportunities on how you might want to get to work, if there's the options available for you, I think with these types of challenges, it's really trying to help people understand it or feel more comfortable with making a different option. So with Go-tober, they usually have different prizes for the weeks depending on how you commute. I will say that it's pretty all-encompassing. So it doesn't have to be just that you bike or walk to work. It's transit. It's telework, that you made the decision to stay home and work that day. So you can kind of structure that and put in however you worked that day or got to work.
Yeah, and we'll link to that one in our show notes too. A cool opportunity. I know for me, like my first time biking to work was on Bike to Work Day. It was like that was the incentive and the impetus, and then you get a little bit more comfortable trying it out on kind of this day where there's a lot of people around and stuff. And yeah, so cool opportunities.
I was just going to add, Dr. COG is an acronym for Denver Regional Council of Governments.
Yes.
And so they, not everyone knows when the City of Arvada line ends and Westminster starts. And so Dr. COG helps kind of put these regional wide programs together so that everyone's kind of participating on the same page.
Yeah,
and October is a great time to bike to work because the weather is ideal for it. I know sometimes in summer months, the morning ride might be comfortable, but then you're looking at getting home in, high 90s and it's not as comfortable. So a great time of year to take on that challenge, and always helps with an incentive if you're getting tracked and competing with other either people that you work with or organizations too. All right, it's time for the lightning round. I will do the lightning round. Are you ready, Kellee?
I am ready.
These are just, simple set of questions we ask every guest that comes on Inside Arvada. And the first one is, what is your favorite thing about Arvada? Is it a place, a fact, even a hidden gem?
Well, it would be easy for me to say the trails because I'm a bike pack coordinator. But I love Old Town. I think it's wonderful. Just walking down there and kind of just like feeling your surroundings and having everything just really available to you. There's the transit connection too. And so really it's just it's a great place to be or kind of stop or make a trip somewhere else.
Absolutely. I feel like Trails and Parks is usually top answer, but Old Town is a close second if we were to keep track throughout each episode. What was your first, last, or best concert?
I will say my best concert was Roger Waters. I saw him back in 2006. I was in my study abroad program, so saw him in Rome, and it was a lot of fun. He played kind of a mix between Pink Floyd and his individual stuff, but then after intermission, he came back and played the entirety of Dark Side of the Moon.
Wow.
So that was a lot of fun.
That sounds amazing. What brought you to Arvada?
My husband lived here when he was younger. And so when we first started dating, that was kind of always a thing that we were planning on doing, and was moving back out here. And I think once our kids started getting older, there was kind of like our drive to make the switch before kids hit middle school or high school age. So it was kind of now or never. And I think too, with the pandemic, we were just kind of looking for a shift in things too. So that kind of helped with moving on.
Yeah. What was your first job?
I guess I babysat from a really young age, but otherwise, when each of me and my siblings turned 14, my dad's like, you need to get out of the house and go work. And so I worked in fast food.
What fast food? You gotta tell us.
I worked at Burger King.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
And then finally, what's your favorite project you've done with the city so far?
So I think it might be a tie just because Little Dry Creek is top of mind with it just wrapping up here. That's been a really great one. But I think like overall, probably Bike to Work Day is just while it's tedious and there's a lot that goes into it, that morning of where we're handing out food and getting to talk with constituents about their concerns, issues, or just kind of like celebrating the day is really wonderful. And I always enjoy that.
Absolutely. Appreciate you putting that on each year. It's always something I look forward to. And the Winter Bike to Work Day was fun this year too. So, well, thank you so much, Kellee, for joining us. I know it's a topic that our listeners are really passionate about. And so we were both very grateful for you to come on and share more about it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks. So before we let you go, as always, we'll leave you with some upcoming news and events things going on in Arvada. And as very fitting, since we were talking with our bike pedestrian coordinator, Kellee, today, that the city is also a designated bike-friendly community and has been designated so since 2010. And while we didn't talk with her about kind of the specifics of what that means, we are working through maintaining that certification, and Kellee helps to lead the application process essentially, and all of the documentation that goes into maintaining that status as a bike-friendly community. And one of the final steps in that process is a bike-friendly community survey that is open for community feedback right now. And so we encourage everybody to take that survey and share what it's like to bike in Arvada, or even if you're just interested in beginning to bike in Arvada or what you'd like to see in the future, that survey will help us to complete that certification for the future. And then if you didn't know, we have a newer feature on our in our show notes. You can text the show now. And so if you have questions or feedback, you can actually just go into the show notes and click the link to send us a message right from your phone. So super easy to do. And we really love to hear from our listeners. You all have been sending in some really good questions. The one caveat about the text option is that we can't reply to it directly. So if you email us, we can send you an email back and get you an answer more quickly. Otherwise, we can and then we'll answer it for the larger group on the show still, for all of our listeners to get the answer to a question they might have as well. But if you text, we can't do that. So you'll be waiting until the show to get the answer, or put some contact information into that text message for us, and we can get back to you that way. And so recently we did have someone text in a question after our episode with Community and Economic Development Director Jessica Gardner, because we mentioned the Taste and Talk series that she is working on kicking off as kind of a part of the comprehensive planning process. And at the time, we said we were going to link to the show notes, but actually didn't have the link just yet and didn't have the details just yet. And so someone was asking for those details. So the first Taste and Talk event of the series is going to be Tuesday, September 24th from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. at the Apex Center off of 72nd Avenue. And so we will now link, there is a live webpage with more information now. So we will put that link in the show notes now. And then, Sean, at the end of summer, going into fall pretty quickly. What's going on?
Yeah, still a few summer events as we kind of wind down and transition to fall. As mentioned, I think previously, the Lake Arbor Golf Course is celebrating its 50th anniversary with some limited edition commemorative collectibles, some really cool drinkware that we had created to celebrate the 50th anniversary. And you can learn more at lakearborgolf.com. The way it works is you play around, get a drink, and you get to keep that drink glass to keep and bring home with you. And then as a reminder, the Old Town Fountain is now weekends only now that we've passed Labor Day, and that'll be through September, and then we'll shut that fountain off starting in October until the spring. So thanks again to our guest today, Kellee Van Bruggen. Be sure to check out our next episode featuring Senior Sustainability Coordinator Nalini Margaitis, where we'll be talking about that climate action and sustainability plan. And always, you can stay in touch with the podcast by visiting our website at arvadaco.gov/podcast. You can also send us an email, as Katie mentioned, at podcast@arvada.org, and we can read some of those questions on the next episode. We appreciate you listening. Please, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and give us a rating or review, and that helps get more audience listeners to the show. Today's podcast was recorded and edited by Arvada Media Services producer James Long. And today's fun fact is Kellee mentioned the trail counters that we have set out throughout the city, and we've got 1 year of data so far to look at. And the busiest day last year was out on the western part of the Ralston Creek Trail just south of Shadow Mountain Park. It saw 2,190 trips on April 14th. So that's our fun fact of the day.
Whoa.